From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Let's start with a couple of corrections from yesterday's show. Or at least clarifications, put it that way. I used the word divestment several times, and I didn't really use it as precisely as I needed to. Divestment, of course, is removing financial relationships, specifically investments. It was a big deal, you may remember, back in the days of South African apartheid, where everybody was calling for divestment, and Ronald Reagan was arguing for the opposite of that. He wanted to be engaged. So I think it's an important strategy, and yesterday we were talking about climate crisis and how we need to be active in support of mitigating, reversing climate crisis. And all of the industries, the corporations who are either not moving fast enough or, in many cases, taking us in the exact opposite direction we need to go, we need to divest. Now, for a lot of us, for most of us, that's not the right way to think about it. What we want to do is boycott. We don't want to buy their products and services. So that's a more precise way of talking about it. I was throwing the word divestment around too loosely yesterday, and I just wanted you to know that I caught that, and I apologize. Now, as far as divestment, yeah, we absolutely have to call for it, and it's still a very, very important tool that we call on states, universities, pension funds, anybody who's controlling a lot of money. It's a really powerful tool to convince them to divest from entities that would harm the climate. So, divestment. And then the other clarification was, in that same conversation, we were talking about how activism, protesting, really has to include the concept of disruption. And you and I have talked about this before. And this is the basic Martin Luther King line. He always tried to remind us that peaceful, when you say peaceful protest, means non-violent, and that's the real key term, non-violence. Yeah, no violence, zero tolerance for violence, but it's not to be mistaken with timid or even necessarily law-abiding. You can be non-violent and still be very aggressive. You can block highways. You can occupy buildings. You can engage in civil disobedience and in civil disruption. Yeah, we want to disrupt things. So when you hear peaceful protest, and when you hear somebody like me say, as I did yesterday, that all protests must be peaceful, I need to be more precise with my language. No, all protests need to be nonviolent, but disruption, civil disobedience, very, very much in the playbook for what needs to be done. All right, so I just wanted to start with that, make sure we're all on the same page. And then I guess the other fundamental tenet that came to mind after our talk yesterday, and a lot of it was about taking power from those who have it, the 10% richest among us in wealth and income, the multinational corporations, and the governments of rich and powerful nations. They're not going to surrender power. We have to take it. And once we do, and this is going to get into a little political theory here, it's not real sophisticated. I'm going to keep this kind of general. It's the best I can do. I'm going to be a strong proponent for horizontal power rather than vertical power. And it's really easy to get caught up in language and in jargon. So I try not to do that. I try to speak plainly. But that's basically what social anarchy is. Anarchism gets a bad name because all the people who are against it, the battle of language, and the bad guys often win the battles in language. And the bad guys have got everybody convinced that anarchy means lawlessness and chaos and violence. And no. Anarchy simply means a horizontal power structure rather than a vertical one, up and down. It's not a hierarchy. There's still organization. Anarchy doesn't mean chaos. Anarchism, and there are people way more qualified than me. I'm not putting myself forward as an expert here. In fact, our home station, WXRW, River West Radio, right here in the greatest neighborhood in the world in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there are a couple shows that sort of specialize in this very thing. So I bow to higher experts. But the general idea is that within anarchism, it could be highly organized, but the power structure is horizontal. There's not a hierarchy. There's not the powerful and then the ruled. So anarchy doesn't mean that there's no organization, there's no cooperation. No, just the opposite. So that's why if I am going to slap a label on myself, the one label that seems to fit best for me is social anarchist. Well, I don't want to get too deeply into this. One, because I just don't want to, and two, because, as I said, I'm not qualified to do it. But I will suggest that you look into it and just, look up social anarchy. Look up Emma Goldman. Anarcho, what's the other term? I saw a really interesting televised debate from many years ago. It was Noam Chomsky debating Foucault. What was Foucault's first name? I forgot. Was it Charles? Charles Foucault? Anyway, it was really interesting. And they were debating this very thing. And Chomsky used the term anarcho-syndicalism. Have I got that right? You experts out there? Anarcho-syndicalism. I'll have to look and see exactly what that term means. Speaking of not being an expert, I came across this little post from somebody called Tinfoil Awards. It's very simple. I don't know who needs to hear this, which is kind of a nice way to start a post. It's become kind of a catchy little phrase. I don't know who needs to hear this, but automatically believing the exact opposite of what authorities say isn't thinking for yourself. Thinking for yourself in quotes. Yeah, I've certainly come across this particular strategy among my more free-thinking friends. Many people, in my experience, have fallen into a little bit of the pattern where just being contradictory from those in authority is just automatically where they want to be. It's just their knee-jerk reaction. Well, if the administration, if the feds, if Dr. Fauci or whoever, name the accepted authority, whatever they say, I'm going to automatically refute. And that makes me a free thinker. Yeah, no, that just makes you got to do a lot more work than that. You want to make an argument? You want to make a point? Make it. Make your case. I'm very happy to listen to you. But if your knee-jerk reaction is just to be a contrarian, you're just boring. Give me something. Give me something to work with. I love new ideas, and I love ideas that fall outside the box, out of the mainstream. Yeah, that's great. What's more exciting? Fine. But make the case. Anyway, I just thought that was worth hearing. I don't know who needs to hear this, but automatically believing the exact opposite of what authorities say isn't thinking for yourself. And that's especially relevant now with COVID, and I'm sure that's why it was posted. Just because the so-called authorities, the CDC and Fauci and those giving the advice and the guidance, the medical community generally, yeah, they are the establishment. And yeah, more often than not, I want to fight with them. It's in my nature to fight with them. But just to automatically say no, just because of who they are, that doesn't mean I'm thinking for myself. No. Well, you know how I feel about COVID. Damn it, just go get the vax. And I'm wearing my mask these days just because of where we are. All right, what else is going on? Oh, we spent a lot of time talking about climate yesterday. Interesting article in The Guardian, an opinion piece. The climate crisis will create two classes, those who can flee and those who cannot. Peter Gleick, or Gleek, generally runs down the most recent information on how bad things might get and gives some examples of what we know that the people already impacted by climate and the people who are going to be impacted by climate are people of color and the poor among us, of course. All so-called natural disasters, somehow nature knows how to hit poor people harder than rich people. How does nature know that? Isn't that amazing? So this is part of what he writes here. Dismayed by the realization that the climate crisis is going to produce two classes of refugees, those with the freedom and financial resources to try, for a while at least, to flee from growing threats in advance, and those who will be left behind to suffer the consequences in the form of illness, death, and destruction. Decisions about where to live, when we're lucky enough to have the ability to choose, are deeply personal, a function of family, friends, jobs, wealth, and idiosyncratic preferences about community, health, environment, and yes, climate and weather. But from the point of view of a scientist, certain facts about our changing environment are now glaringly unambiguous. Sea levels are rising, and risks from coastal flooding and storms, already extremely high in some places, are growing fast. Rising temperatures are already causing more extreme heat events, which have always been lethal and are becoming more so. Wildfires are increasing in frequency, intensity, and duration in many parts of the world, threatening communities with death and destruction and causing severe air pollution for millions. The severity of both droughts and floods are on the rise in some regions, with consequences for water availability and quality and public health. Worldwide, nearly 700 million people now living in low-lying coastal zones vulnerable to sea level rise and coastal storms. That number could reach 1 billion by 2050. Island nations could be completely wiped out by rising seas and storms. Even a rise of only a meter, that's about 39 inches, almost certainly unavoidable now, will displace millions of people in Florida and along the Gulf Coast, causing trillions of dollars in damages and property loss. Yeah, we were just talking about this the other day. Insurance companies certainly know, they know the score, and they're adjusting their finances accordingly. And no one will be surprised when, you might think it's bad news for the people living in these areas, but for the owner class who own these buildings and developments, and well, should we feel sorry for them? They're going to find a way. They know the truth. The owner class who tries to convince you that climate change isn't a thing and don't worry about it, and they want to continue with the status quo. They know in their boardrooms exactly what's going on, and they're making their plans accordingly, and they're going to do fine. In fact, people, as they always do, just because it's the nature of the beast, they're going to find ways to profit. All right, well, this land is being devalued, or it's going to be underwater soon. That makes that land over there even more valuable. Okay, let's pool our money together and get our development going and get all our deals together. Yeah, why should it be any different than it's been for the last 100 years? Those with the money and the power to do something about it will do something about it. So, yeah, there will be two classes. I mean, there already are. But unless and until we destroy the current system, the divide will only expand between the rich and the poor. And with each drought and with each flood and with every coastal city that sinks into the water, the rich will find a way to profit from it. The rich will get richer. The poor will get poorer. It's just been the way of the world for the last how many decades? Why would it be any different? Did you hear that Fox News, oh God, did you hear that Fox News is starting a weather channel? Lord mercy, can you imagine? They lie about everything under the goddamn sun. Now they're going to be lying about the weather. Everybody get your fat black Sharpies ready to go, because whatever narrative suits your right-wing fascist white supremacist agenda, we'll make sure that our weather channel doesn't disrupt the world order that we want. Rupert Murdoch, Fox Corporation. Long history. I'm reading from Mother Jones now. A long history of peddling climate disinformation is entering the world of 24-hour weather coverage. Scientists and watchdog groups are understandably wary of the new venture, anticipating that the network's weather arm will prove just as skewed, politicized, and detached from reality as its cable news programming. Fox News commentators and their guests are constantly downplaying and denying the global threat of climate change, even amid historic and deadly heat waves, wildfires, hurricanes, and drought. God. That's, let's see, Christy Angelo, Mother Jones. So, just the thought of it, the idea is comical, but the timing of it is just frightening. It's tragic and sad. Reading again here, Susan Joy Hassel, director of the nonprofit organization Climate Communication and a co-author of 3 national climate assessments, has spent years working with journalists and TV meteorologists to better communicate the connections between extreme weather and human-caused climate change. Given Fox's record, she's extremely concerned about what the new weather-focused channel will mean for the public's understanding of the crisis and its impacts. Unless Fox changes its stripes, this could be a real move in the wrong direction, not only failing to make the appropriate linkages, but shouting them down and providing more disinformation to an audience that trusts them, she said. So, Fox, weather. So now we got Fox weather. And they've politicized literally everything. I mean, Dr. Seuss, Mr. Potato Head, just name it. Name any institution or pop culture, anything in the culture. Major League Sports, television and movies, of course. They just politicized everything. The Teletubbies are gay. Hollywood is all left-wing socialists creating anti-capitalist propaganda. I mean, politics, of course. I mean, that's their ground zero. Disinformation regarding politics and news. And now they're moving into the weather with a 24-hour channel. Good Lord. Oh, I mentioned Chuck Schumer earlier. Here, let's stay on the climate news for a little bit. You know the Sunrise Movement? They are excited about a news story from, I guess this is a couple weeks ago now. I'll just read you the headline. This is huge. Schumer commits to creating civilian climate corps. Reading from Common Dreams right now. After being targeted by progressive climate campaigners, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer made clear on Wednesday, let's get our dates here, that would have been July 7th, something like that he will work to include the creation of a civilian climate corps in evolving federal infrastructure legislation. Now, I have to make a confession. I'm not sure where that stands today. It's a moving target. Every day we see headlines. Oh, the talks are stalled. Oh, they almost have a deal. They're just about ready. The time between now, when I record this, and the time when you hear it, something may have happened. So with that in mind, still good for Chuck. Schumer issued a lengthy statement outlining his support for the inclusion of a Civilian Climate Corps, the CCC, which was inspired by a New Deal-era program and formally unveiled as legislation earlier this year by Senator Ed Markey, Democrat in Massachusetts. He's one of the good guys. We like Ed Markey. And Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat in New York. We all love AOC around here. On the same day, they introduced the Green New Deal resolution. The Sunrise Movement, whose New York City chapter took to the streets to push Schumer on the CCC proposal, celebrated his statement as a victory for local organizers and the youth-led movement more broadly. In the upcoming American Jobs and Families Plans legislation, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to confront the climate crisis and create millions of middle-class family-sustaining union jobs, Schumer said. Creating a new civilian climate corps is a key step towards both goals. The Senate Majority Leader vowed to work tirelessly to achieve a big and bold civilian climate corps that places justice at the center and urgently addresses the interlocking climate and economic crises. In the coming weeks, I look forward to working in New York with Sunrise Movement, community organizations, and unions on a shared vision for the CCC, he added, thanking the dedicated young organizers and activists who have brought the idea of a new civilian climate corps this far. So there you go. There's a little bit of good news. Now, we have to put this into context, of course. The discussion that opened up our show today about a horizontal power structure, this doesn't meet those goals. The Civilian Climate Corps. Within the power structure that currently exists, it's about the very best thing you can hope for. But it's not going to save us. Only the shift of power will save us. Well, let's see here. One more story that caught my eye and certainly ties in with what we've been talking about here. The system we need versus the system we have. Well, the system we have. Let's see, this headline from the Center for Media and Democracy, CMD, which I recommend. Dark money voter suppression group holds academy for lawmakers before ALEC annual meeting. Now, you know about ALEC, don't you? You really ought to if you don't. The American Legislative Exchange Council. It's an organization that gets lawmakers together in big rooms. They literally write legislation. And it's a big money, right-wing, corporate, think tank sort of a thing, but they do a lot more than think. They're not just thinking. They are very active, and they literally write legislation. ALEC is one of the prime movers. It's why around the country you see Republican legislatures, state legislatures, all seeming to be doing the same thing at the same time. And you wonder, how is this? They're pushing the same bills. A couple summers ago, there was terrible abortion bills, anti-abortion bills, I should say. And now, most recently, the voter suppression laws. Yeah, groups like ALEC, and ALEC especially, get these guys in big rooms and ballrooms, and they lavish them with presents and free trips and meals and hotel stays, and they live it up, and they have a fine old time. And then they hand them the legislation that they've written. Here you go. Take this back to your state. This is what we want. This is what we need. And so, yeah, they go back to Indiana and Missouri and Kentucky and Alabama and Utah and wherever they're going. And all of a sudden, in 14, 15, 18 different states around the country, we're hearing the same legislation being proposed. Well, okay, this comes up again. Reading now David Armiak of Center for Media and Democracy. The American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, will hold an exclusive invitation-only academy for state lawmakers with the Honest Elections Project on July 26th through 28th in Salt Lake City, Utah, prior to the start of its annual meeting. So it's happening right now as we speak. Over the 2.5-day fun and educational event, as they call it, attendees will participate in panel discussions featuring legislators and experts on both state and federal election-related policies, as well as expert-led talks on polling, litigation, and federal overreach. This was according to an email invitation obtained by the CMD. Legislators will participate in roundtable discussions on what states have done to improve election integrity, the Republicans' buzz phrase for making it harder to vote. In addition, 3 secretaries of state have been invited to discuss the implementation of new election legislation. The academy will take place at the 5-star Grand American Hotel, where ALEC will provide 2 nights of accommodations, 5 meals, and a $450 travel reimbursement for attendees. I don't know how this is legal, but it is. This is legal in America. A private group can invite politicians to have a big old time in a nice big old fancy hotel. They can pay for their trip, pay for the accommodations, pay for their meals, and even give them just an extra $450 of mad money. The so-called Honest Elections Project is a dark money voter suppression group formed in February 2020 as a project of Leonard Leo's The 85 Fund, known as Trump's Judge Whisperer, Leo worked quietly behind the scenes to organize a right-wing takeover of the U.S. Supreme Court. So we're running low on time. Let's let it go at that. But just to bring this to your attention, and just a friendly reminder, this is the kind of thing that's happening behind the scenes. You're not going to see any press. What am I reading again? I forgot. Oh, yeah. Center for Media and Democracy. You know, this isn't going to make big headlines. You probably didn't see this story. I'm guessing you didn't. This is the kind of thing that's happening all the time. Yeah, that last reference to this Leo guy, do yourself a favor. All right, I'll give you one more little recommendation before we say goodbye today. Do you remember Sheldon Whitehouse? Yeah, Sheldon Whitehouse, U.S. Senator from Rhode Island. And in the, I can't remember. Was it the Kavanaugh hearings? It was the Amy Coney Barrett hearings. That's right. Where he spent really a great deal of time schooling all of us, and of course, directing his remarks to the nominee, schooling her, on all the dark money. And we're talking big money, millions and millions of dollars, to influence the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court itself. To this day, we have no idea where Brett Kavanaugh got his millions and millions of dollars on his salary as a federal judge. He had loans paid off. He had some big old house he bought. I forget all the details now, but we're talking real money that has never been answered about Brett Kavanaugh. Well, anyway, Sheldon Whitehouse spent hours and hours giving this sort of TED Talk presentation in great detail about the whole world of dark money and the judiciary. So I'm going to highly suggest you just Google it up. Just, YouTube it up. Sheldon Whitehouse, dark money, Supreme Court. It'll pop right up. And you've got hours of viewing. I never quite saw anything like it from a committee member in the Senate. It was quite a performance. And the information is just amazing. So I recommend that. But anyway, this is what's going on. Alec, behind closed doors, greasing the palms, writing legislation, passing around dark money. We got people in suits and ties getting up every day working very hard to do this stuff. And they're good at what they do, and they know what they're doing, and they got a hell of a lot of money to grease the wheels. All right, so all the more reason. We can't fight this stuff incrementally. We can't isolate one problem over here and one problem over there. We can't play whack-a-mole with these kinds of problems. That's why I keep going back and I keep going back over and over and over to the big fundamental changes that take money and power out of the picture. And then things like this will cease to exist. But only if we have a horizontal power structure where mutual aid and cooperation are the fundamental defining characteristics. Because either we follow the path we're on and we all just die of the next pandemic or climate crisis, whichever gets us first. Or we trash the system and go to the horizontal system. Those are our two options. All right, so there's the Alex story. Okay, that's the log for today. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.